Can you imagine a husband who died 7 years ago showing up at his widow's second wedding? How would you react if you witnessed a thing like this? What will you do? As Chinyere kneels with her groom for their blessings, a ghostly figure appears behind them. And it's Obinna. He's not a ghost. Obinna passed after a storm in the village, or so the villagers thought. The entire village mourned him, but nobody knew he did not pass to the great beyond. 7 years later, he walked out of the river to stop his wife's wedding. This is a captivating true life story of Obinna and Chinyere. It was the wedding day of Chinyere, Chini for short, the jewel of the village of Umuanyao, and Chiemela, a prosperous trader whose smile was as wide as his generosity. 7 years. For 7 years the village had mourned with Chinyere. They remembered Obinna, her first husband, a man whose strength was unmatched. And he was very gentle. He was a great hunter, a man who could read the whispers of the forest. Then came the day of the great storm, the day the sky kept weeping, and it wept black tears, and the wind blew like 1,000 grieving spirits. A giant Iroko tree, ancient and respected, had fallen across the path to the market. And Obinna's trading canoe, along with 2 others, was found splintered beneath it. No bodies were ever recovered from the churning river, only fragments of clothes and shattered wood. The diviners had thrown their cowries, and elders had nodded grimly, and Obinna's funeral rites were performed. Chinyere had mourned him with a silence that was more profound than any wail. Please subscribe to this channel, turn on your notification bell, like and comment. Thank you. She had worn black for 2 full years. But time, as the elders would say, is a patient farmer. It plants new seeds in the fields of sorrow. Chiemela, a good and patient man, had courted her with respect, never rushing, allowing her heart to heal. Now, Chiemela sees her radiant in vibrant dresses, her skin glowing, her smile finally reaching her eyes. The village felt a collective sense of relief. The past was a ghost, and today is for the living. The ceremony was at its peak. Chinyere and Chiemela knelt before her father, receiving his blessings. The air was thick with the scent of jollof rice, goat meat, and palm wine. Laughter filled the compound. Then a shadow fell upon the happy gathering. It started as a murmur at the edge of the crowd, a ripple of confusion that spread inward, silencing the joy as it moved. A man walked towards the bride and groom and stood behind them. A man who did not belong. He was emaciated, he was gaunt. His skin was taut over his bones, and it was darkened. He wore clothes that seemed woven from dried leaves, and his feet were bare, caked in the mud from a long, impossible journey. But it was his eyes that held the crowd captive. They were old, ancient even, and they burnt with a sorrowful intensity as they scanned the celebration, finally locking onto the kneeling bride and groom. Chinyere, he said. The voice was dry, like leaves skittering across a stone, yet it carried across the now silent compound with unnatural clarity. Chinyere froze. That voice! It was a melody from a life she had buried. She slowly turned her head, her heart heavy, her eyes widened, and the calabash of wine in her hand slipped, spilling its content. Chiemela, seeing the terror in his new wife's face, rose to his feet. The stranger took a step forward and then another. The villagers in shock. They saw him as a spirit who had lost its way from the ancestral land. It was impossible. It was Obinna. He was no longer the robust hunter they remembered. He looked like a man who had wrestled with spirits and only barely won. "They told me you were dead," Chinyere whispered, her voice trembling. "We performed your funeral. We mourned you for 7 years." Obinna's ancient eyes did not leave her face. A flicker of pain crossed his features as he looked from her to Chiemela, the man who now occupied his place. "Death is not always an ending," he said, his voice gaining a sliver of its old strength. "Sometimes it is a doorway, and where I have been 7 years was but a single breath." The chief elder, Ezeokafo, a man whose face was a map of wisdom and tradition, finally found his voice. He struck his staff of office on the ground, the sound echoing in the unnatural silence. "Abomination! A spirit does not walk in the daylight to disrupt the living. Who are you? Speak, before we call the Dibia," the Juju priest, "to cast you back into the darkness from where you came." Obinna's gaze shifted to the elder. There was no fear in his eyes, only a profound weariness. "I am Obinna, the son of Mazi Ogbuefi, husband to Chinyere here. I am not spirit. Though I have walked in their lands, my story is not for the ears of a celebrating crowd. But I will tell it, for my return is more shocking than my long absence, and the truth of where I have been will shake the very foundations of this village." The entire village, it seemed, was now gathered in the market square, the air thick with tension and the buzzing of 1,000 whispered questions. Obinna stood in the center, a solitary figure now flanked by 2 of the king's guards. Chinyere sat on a low stool beside her father. She could not look at Chiemela, who stood stiffly with his kinsmen, his face a mask of anger and shock. Ezeokafo said to Obinna, "You have made a claim that troubles the spirits of our ancestors and the peace of our community," he declared, his voice a low rumble. "You say you walk where the spirits walk? The land of the dead is a place from which no man returns. Speak your story, Obinna, and know that if you speak lies, your true death will be swifter and less merciful than the one we thought you had." Obinna took a deep breath, the air whistling in his lungs. When he spoke, his voice was that of a storyteller's cadence, hypnotic and chilling. "The storm you remember was no ordinary storm," he began. "It was a summons. As the Iroko tree fell, I was not crushed. I was thrown into the river, and the waters did not drown me. They pulled me under, down into a current that does not flow towards any sea known to man. I was pulled down through the riverbed itself. It was a land of twilights," Obinna continued, his eyes distant as if seeing that world again. "Time does not pass there as it does here. The sun and moon do not exist there. The question now is, how do you choose between the man you married, he passed, you mourned him, and then he reappears? Just when you are about to marry another 7 years after." Obinna continued, "They said I was chosen. The great Iroko tree that fell was one of their sacred messengers. Its fall had created an imbalance between our world and theirs. A debt was owed. My life was spared in exchange for its service. For 7 years of their twilight world, I was to be the keeper of their forest. I could not live. I did not eat. I did not sleep. I watched years change in the blink of an eye there. Why now? One of the elders asked, his voice shaking. Why after 7 years have you returned on this very day? Please subscribe to this channel, turn on your notification bell, like, and comment. Thank you. Obinna's gaze found Chinyere's. A deep sadness entered his voice. The joy of this wedding, he said, his voice cracking. The joy of this wedding was a drumbeat so loud. I saw my wife from there, binding herself to another. My anger opened a path for me, and I walked out of the riverbank, 2 miles from here, this very morning. What has been 7 years for you has been an eternity and a moment for me. I have not aged. I have not lived, but I have returned. Silence everywhere. The story was fantastical, impossible, yet told with a conviction that chilled the bone. It was a true story. Obinna's appearance was a testament to his tale. Ezeokafo said, tradition has no precedence for this. A woman could not have 2 husbands. A man declared dead and mourned could not simply reclaim his life as if picking up a dropped stone. Yet, if the man spoke the truth, he was not a spirit, but a man wronged by the gods themselves. And to deny him would be to invite the wrath of a deity far more powerful than any village elder. Finally, Obinna looked at Chinyere, whose face was filled with tears of confusion, sorrow, and a terrifying resurgent love. This matter is beyond the wisdom of men, the Eze declared, his voice heavy. A sacrifice must be made to cleanse the land, and Chinyere shall return to her husband. Obinna was elated. Then Obinna moved close to Chinyere, held her hands, and smiled for the very first time as they both took a walk into reunion and unspeakable love.